Nice ties, gentlemen.
We're just live now, so we'd like to welcome ladies and gentlemen. We've got members of the public and we have a new staff member down the back. Would somebody like to introduce our new staff member?
Irina?
Yeah, may I introduce Irina Moore. Irina is our new, yes, she's new. Irina is our new EPMO manager, so our Enterprise Program Management Officer. That role's been vacant for about 12 months and we're really lucky to have Irina here actually. She's come out of the Waikato, she was working at the Wānanga and has been doing similar to what we want to try and achieve here. She's already been doing that at the Wānanga for about 9 years. So is bringing all of that knowledge into our organisation, recognises where we are in terms of our journey, and I think we're going to get some real strong benefit out of having her here. So welcome Irina, and this is the council.
Hi Irina, welcome. Right, now we will start the meeting today with a karakia from Councillor O'Brien.
Morena tata, mogi whakatūtu te tirake nui tata, whataka te hauki te uru, whataka te hauki te kia mākina kina ki uti, kia mātaratara ki tai. He hiaki ana te ata akura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, uti he kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we've got a couple of meeting notices, the usual live streaming. Whakatane District Council are now live streaming our council and standing committee meetings held in our totara room within the council building. The webcast will live stream directly to council's website and YouTube channel in real time. The purpose of streaming our meetings is to provide greater access to council debate, decision making and to encourage transparency. Whakatane District Council are now live streaming Sorry. So good you wanted to hear it twice. To those members of the public here today, all care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, by remaining in the public gallery, it is understood that your consent has been given if your presence is inadvertently broadcast. Please be aware the microphones in our room are sensitive to noise, so please remain quiet throughout the meeting unless asked to speak. Our second meeting notice is health and safety. In case of an emergency, please follow the building wardens or make your way to the nearest exit. The meeting point is located across the road at Peace Park and bathroom facilities are situated to the left near the chamber foyer entranceway. The other one last item, there is a late item to be considered as the last item of the agenda. Hence, I'd like to put the following motions regarding this late item. That the Finance and Performance Committee considers pursuant to Section 46A of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 the following item at this meeting. 1. The late report, Health, Safety and Wellbeing Report, April to June 2024, and the reason for lateness is the importance of relaying health and safety information to councillors is timely to ensure full health and safety situational awareness. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Isles, Councillor James. I'll put the motion. I don't think there's any discussion, so all those in favour please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Right, turning the page, we do have some apologies. We've got Councillor Puller, he's away on other council business. We've got Councillor Tanchos and Councillor Rangiaho, and Mayor Luca has to leave at about 10 a.m. for other council business. So would we have a mover for the apologies? Deputy Mayor Imick, Councillor Boyden seconds. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Does anybody have any acknowledgements or tributes for today's meeting? Councillor Boynton.
Yes, I'd like to pay tributes to Titoki Black. Fire was very instrumental in the resurgence and establishment of Kohanga Reo, and also had a large contribution to ensuring the survival of Te Reo and Meona Tikana for our Māori people. So I just wanted to pay tribute. She is lying in state in Rātoki. Her burial is today. I'd also have another acknowledgement, and that is like to acknowledge Deputy Mayor Immick and also Community Board Member Mark Inman for the presentation that they did at the Community Boards Conference at the local government conference that was held last week. There was an overwhelming lot of positive feedback. Apparently there was not a dry eye in the House. They did a presentation in regards to the response and the resilience of communities in regards to whakaari and the family. So I just want to acknowledge Deputy Mayor Immick and also Mark Inman. It was said, many had said after seeing the presentation that they would like to see it presented at the national conference, the local government. So.
Excellent, that's lovely, thank you. Any other acknowledgements or tributes? No. Do we have any conflicts of interest to declare today? No, lovely. We don't have any public forum at today's meeting, so we'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Mayor Luca? Councillor Isle seconds. Any discussion or corrections or anything before I put the motion? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. All right, we can move on to our very first report. Just so you know, we have a tabled item which should be here. It's Appendix 1 and the first page is land rates arrears. Have the members of the public got those copies of those as well? They're on the table if you don't and would like one. And we'll go through this report page by page, I think, because it's quite technical. Would you like to give us a summary to start with, though, Gary?
Absolutely. So I suppose on page 11 of the Stella, page 11 of the report, 3.1 probably summarises the majority of the financial performance before we start talking about debtors, etc. later on. The key components there are effectively having met the majority of financial targets, and I'd probably summarise that in comparison to the table under 4.1, and I think this is consistent with how we expected, but I mean I think it's worth noting. If you look at the variance between the full year actual and the full year budget, at this level, that's quite a good consistent performance with having set an annual plan coming into what was quite a volatile year and then turning out results largely in line with that. The major area of difference, which we'll actually cover a little bit more in the following paper, was on CapEx, but hopefully you'll recall as councillors, we had indicated that we would need to review the CapEx budget during the year. We did that in September. We reset the capital budget in September down substantively. We have delivered below that for some logical reasons, and the rationale for the timing of those we'll cover. But that percentage of true carry forward from what we expected from the CapEx and what was actually delivered is a lot more consistent than we've been able to demonstrate in previous years. We've still got a way to go. Definitely some improvement in that space to keep working on, but that's probably area of major variance. And because of the differential in the CapEx, we've been able to deliver borrowings at a lower level than we had originally budgeted for as well. And that will have some carry forward because we'll end up using more, and that's because we'd already carried some of this into, so this is some of the benefit that offsets loan funding that we had already carried into the LTP. Doesn't reduce the LTP because we'd already contemplated, but doesn't add to it either. Happy.
I've got questions from Councillor Dennis and Deputy Mayor Immick. We will go through it page by page, but are they an overall question, or you want to wait for that page? Overall? Thank you, Councillor Dennis.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Since we're starting on page 11, and I do apologise that I'm still suffering the side effects of a bad case of COVID last week, but despite that, Gary, I didn't actually understand it, sorry. So when we go into that first bullet point under 3.1, this is really technical, and I appreciate you're a technical person.
Yep.
So a surplus of operating activities is 6.6 million, is 3 million higher than the revised budget of 3.7, 6 million. What does that mean?
So
Is this surplus a permanent surplus, or is this just a temporary one because we haven't spent the money that we've got in? It's just...
the majority of this is driven by temporary. So if I had to split them, I think it's essentially 2 million of it is timing differential. Operating projects, rather than not core day-to-day BAU expenditure, that's delivered and has been consistent. But we've got about 2 million of operating projects that have that will carry into the next LTP. So we will need to spend the money next year that we originally hadn't anticipated. We didn't spend it this year, we will spend it next year. The balance, the 1 million, is really savings during the year. What I couldn't tell you absolutely is whether that's a permanent saving that's repeatable or whether it's driven by one-off timing. Because that can be, so as an example, that could be driven in the year by staff having taken on more leave than they would normally take. Or it's because we have more vacancy than we would normally have. So I can't guarantee that that same level of vacancy will be available in all future years.
So is that relating to the 1 million you've got in the same sentence, or second sentence?
No.
So that's a different 1 million. Okay. So what I'm trying to ask is, the surplus we've got, is that a permanent surplus or not? And if it is a permanent, none of it's permanent.
It's just for this year.
So because we've got a surplus this year, that's why you're having to borrow less, because we've already got it. And that's why, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next bullet point, could you explain that one, please? It's got about 5 or 6 different figures in it. And it's don't know.
That's because each of them has a particular influence in the ecology of our finances, if you like. So the first bullet point is around what we call operating performance. The second is particularly about capital performance, right? Because they have very distinct differences in terms of, without getting too basic, spending money on operating means it's for today's activity, today, this year.
Yep.
CapEx provides benefits and timing over multiple years, so therefore you have to account for them properly. So we're largely in line with a little bit of savings in the OPEX. Where we had anticipated spending money on CapEx and delivering projects for the future, we originally had a budget that said we would deliver $89 million worth of CapEx this year. We identified, and that's what I was pointing to, we identified with this committee and with council early on in the process that we expected and knew that not all of that 89 would be delivered in the 24 year. When we did that work in September, we identified, I think it was about 23 million that we knew then would not be delivered. Since then, there's been another about 13 or 14 million that hasn't been delivered in this year. Those projects predominantly are anticipated to be delivered after the 1st of July in future years, most of them in 25. So we haven't had to borrow the money yet because we haven't done the capital projects yet. We still anticipate doing the majority of the capital projects now in the 25 year, and when that happens we will have to borrow the money then.
So if you're saying here that you're going to have $26.9 million difference to what you had budgeted of the 36.8 million, but now you're saying that 14 of that's going to get carried through for projects therefore later on, that means you've got a savings of $12 million that isn't going to get carried forward, that's up our sleeve.
It's not entirely 12, but you're in the right ballpark. Yeah.
So that means of that 12 million that we've got up our sleeve, that means that's the extra money we don't have to. What happened to those projects?
So some of them are projects that have been moved out into more than just last year. So and some of them are permanent timing benefits. Doesn't mean that it has a significant impact. So one of the areas we'll talk about in the next paper in particular is the amount you spend on renewal of your assets each year. And there is a it's a simplified concept that if you didn't spend it on renewal because you didn't have to renew it this year, you've already got renewal budgets next year, so you won't need as much. The counter to that is if we didn't spend it on renewal this year, our assets might have declined more than we'd like, so we need to spend more on it. So we're making calls in relation to those at quite a granular level. That's very difficult to put in summary in this paper.
So with all these multi-million dollars of surpluses and stuff that we haven't spent on, or 12 million we haven't spent on capital expenditure, all those savings will end up with lower rates next year. Is that right?
No, there is a potential that some of the savings, and it's not a substantial amount, because remember capital predominantly gets spread over 30 years. So $1 million
budget for that too.
$1 million
Yes,
of capital
budget's down.
has very little impact on an annualised basis based on the loan levels. But there will be some that we would carry through, not to next year's LT, not to this year, but potentially will help us at a starting point in the 26 annual plan cycle. The majority of it is still offset by carry forward, however.
Yeah, okay, I'll let someone else ask it.
Okay, we're on page 11. I've got Councillor Deputy Mayor Imick, and I've got Mayor Luca also wanting a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's the Mayor's related to the same thing, because my general question is slightly different.
Yeah, I'm on dot point number 2. So for someone looking for comfort, you would say that although we've got this rather large, what seems to be a large deficit in net capital expenditure, we're still going to be on track. We're not going to get worse than in previous years in terms of our capex expenditure. Do you think we're trending okay? Is there a cause for concern?
So I suppose the summary is, in the short term, it looks like you've saved a lot of money, but the reality is all you've done is moved it to the following year. We do need to make sure that we work on, and this is where we were talking about project management, that we work on delivering more consistently, because one of the benefits is we haven't had to borrow immediately. The downside is the cost of the delivery of those projects may be more in future years. And that's the swings and roundabouts we have to manage. So I think there's some positive in that, but there's also some
Cause for concern. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Gary, and everybody else. That's my question is, so this is the end of the financial year, and we get our projections quarterly as we're going through. And so the question is probably more about, when does this drop in your lap, and is there anything we can do to encourage the capex to be delivered in the timeframes that we want? And I know there's weather issues and there's contractor issues, but we're just always behind, and we act like we did. We adjusted, to accommodate that, but it doesn't feel like we're getting any more efficient in our delivery.
So the best way I could describe this is a concept of okay to good to better to best. So I think we've gone from an okay or below okay standard to somewhere to okay to good. So we have made improvements. I think this represents, from a management of projects, insight from a financial perspective, from a CFO's perspective, I've got more comfort now than I had when I arrived. However, the opportunity is for us, as you're pointing out, to continue that cycle of improvement and go from okay to better, okay to good to better. Right? So we've still got improvement to make. I wouldn't say this is the best. The gap in that CAPEX performance is wider than you would like to see. If councillors have agreed to outcomes with management to deliver, then we need to close the gap between what's being expected to be delivered and what is being delivered. We have improved it substantively in the last 2 years, but there is still some improvement to make.
Thank you. Councillor Isles and then Councillor Boynton.
Thank you, Chair. Gary, just still harping on those 2 bullet points. With that, every year we seem to be behind the 8 ball with our capital expenditure. What impact did that actually have on us striking the rate? So often we've had these amounts included in ongoing work programs, So what's the impact? You said earlier about a 30-year span, so I guess it's...
So it's a much more less significant impact than you would possibly expect. The reason is we identified that potential difference in outcome in September last year. So we had already taken that expectation into our LTP. So this is not a surprise at the end of the year that we're now adjusting to. We had already anticipated that. We had already built that into some of the differentials in our LTP. If you recall, there was a stage in the LTP we were able to demonstrate a reduction in the indicated rate we would have to strike. That was partly driven by including some of these benefits in there.
Okay.
Councillor Boynton.
My question really is just not specifically those bullet points, but it's just asking a question around the factors that contribute to this, and it's identified in the full report, but are external factors like legislation changes and also contractors or delays with government agencies who provide subsidies or grants, does that have an impact in terms of our ability to complete our projects and also these figures where we have deficits and surpluses?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say it's the sole cause, but it's one of a combination of causes. I think sometimes, I put this probably down to human nature and lessons learned and experience as we go. You expect things to be able to happen in a sequential way when you face into some of the discovery on new legislation changes or additional parties you have to engage with. You find out that that's now going to take longer than you had originally expected, and that's what's causing some of the delays. Simple answer: yes. Not the sole cause, but definitely one of them.
Thank you.
So I don't see any other questions on page 11. Do we have anything on page 12? It's probably covered off a few in his responses already. What about the actual financial there, the indicative financial performance on page 13? Page 13. 14.
Thank you. Just on page 14, just where it goes down to fees and charges. So since, because this is the end of the financial year, so we have since increased our fees and charges, so we wouldn't expect to see another loss for next year.
So we essentially, I think the point you're making is exactly correct. Because we delayed the putting them in to do proper consultation, we delivered for a period of time fees that were lower than we expected. For the remaining 6 months, the fees have been consistent. Now there's ups and downs based on volumes of activity, but overall reasonably in line for those 6 months. Therefore, I don't think there's any permanent deficit going forward in the total fee space. There are some pluses and minuses in different activities we need to work through, but as a whole, we're in line for the 6 months and will be, we expect, for the coming year.
Thank you.
Okay, page 15. Mayor Luca.
Gary, the Three Water Transition Project, what are you referring to there?
So, while we were still operating prior to the legislative change with the 54th government, there was a process of that transition, centralisation of Three Waters. We incurred cost in working through those issues, delivering information to that process, some of which was subsidised. Last year there was a small subsidy that was left, that was utilised, available as the government's transitioned. We did not utilise all of that funding. We will be able to kind of carry that forward and utilise some of it with the new Local Waters Done Well process.
Thank you.
Sorry, still on page 15. Did you hear me?
Thank you. Just the bullet point, legal and litigation expenses, will any of that be recoverable?
Some of it will, but I would suggest that any benefit from that recovery will actually offset some of the additional that's probably coming this year as well.
Thank you.
One of the areas in forecast I'm anticipating when we do our Q1 forecast at the end of September and deliver that to you in December, that'll be an area we're indicating that there's potential risk.
And just a supplementary, so with our legal fees, it's not something that we rate for, it's actually something we find out at the end of the year.
Yeah, so we kind of do, but we're always playing catch up for us. So it's how close can you get that? So you've already baked in consistency of coverage through the rates. But what we don't want to be doing is being on the wrong side of that, where we're overrating at the front end. So it's getting that balance right. And it's in the legal space, it's always difficult because the volume goes up and down depending on the cases that land.
One furthermore, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, and just the chemical costs. Is this a one-off, or are we going to be facing this like insurance increases in ongoing years?
I would like to say that it's one-off, but I actually think that it's an area where we need to think about, and I know the aquatics team already do a lot of really good work to try to manage this, right? But I do think we need to continue to challenge ourselves by looking at the market and looking at whether we can offset, do things differently. And that may be things like investment in capital so that we can do it, because that might be one of the challenges. You can save money in the long term, but you have to change some of the capital plan to deliver those savings. I think it's that area, and you'll need to speak to it. It's probably that area in aquatics where, from a procurement perspective, I think we would like to be offering more support to the team.
I mean, just looking at the comment here, about water supply.
It's Bramer, yeah.
The budgets have been adjusted, so I assume it's an ongoing additional cost to operate that plant.
I guess if it's going to be an identified ongoing cost, has it already been budgeted in the long-term plan?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Right, page 16. Councillor Dennis.
In the bit about the sources of capital, 4.3.1 capital, source of capital funding, the Matata wastewater subsidy is $2.8 million. Well, where does that figure come from, please?
So when we carried forward when we originally set the Matata project, and it may have been in the budget before LTP, but LTP 2031, we had anticipated that CapEx would occur, some of the CapEx would occur by now, and that we would receive subsidies through MOH and potentially through the regional council. So when that came into the annual plan, both CapEx is left there, but the subsidies were already retained. And what's happened is, as you're aware, that project hasn't gotten as far as indicated by those budgets, and now that rolls into the following year. For Matata, we've essentially done a reset in the LTP. So rather than deal with a carry forward from 2031 and try to keep reconciling the changes, so that's essentially a wash up of not having spent money last year, but also not having therefore been able to access subsidies. Those subsidies, to the best of our knowledge, the MOH one is still available based on the reset, so we haven't lost that subsidy.
So if that's 6.78 million from MOH, this 2.8, is that actually we're carrying forward an expense that we hope to?
No. There's a capital plan in the LTP that we anticipate having that $6+ million to offset.
So this 2.8 is?
It's a timing that did not occur. And I think in the next paper we talk about, you would normally, if you still think that project's going to occur, you still think the subsidy is going to occur, you would normally carry that across the next year. Yeah. What we did, because every time you do these carry forwards, it becomes more challenging to work out the different bits that are moving. So one of the things you do with the LTP, and we put a lot of effort into this, is where possible, rather than dealing with carry forwards, we tried to do a reset in the long-term plan. So Matata has been reset in the long-term plan. This is not, it's an accounting, it hasn't been accounted this year as we budgeted, but we're not going to roll it forward because we've essentially reset Matata in the long-term plan.
Just to give a level of assurance, we haven't lost any anticipated subsidy. So the Ministry have health's total subsidy, as we've know that is still there.
Thank you. Any other questions, page 16? No, we'll move on to page 17. James?
Just on invoicing, are we right up to date with our invoicing? Because I'm constantly getting told, asked by boats in the river, I see that it's starting to occur at the airport and that people aren't getting invoiced for up to 2 years. Is this a problem?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, that is anecdotal. I'm not saying it isn't happening. I'm saying anecdotally it's not systemically happening all over the place. There is, through processes, sometimes information that you think you should have identified doesn't get identified, and we have to do catch-ups. So those will happen occasionally. Again, I don't think there's a systemic problem, but nor do I think we're as good as we need to be in the space. So again, okay to good to better to best. I think we're okay, but I would be wrong to tell you that I think it's okay and we shouldn't worry about looking at it. We should be looking and continuing to improve our accounts receivable processes. There is some opportunity there. I don't think it's substantive in terms of changing the rate base, for example, but it is significant enough in terms of the way we operate and the experience of the customer who's being invoiced that we should be looking to make those improvements. We have anticipated budget to do that in the long-term plan. So it is one of the things we will be focusing on over the next 18 months in particular.
Because to be fair to their cash flows, it's
Absolutely, and that's what I talk about. I don't think we're doing it all over the place, but we need to be better because, and it's you'll appreciate we will be talking at some point this year about what we call the ERP replacement, which is one of our systems, right? One of the things we're focusing on there is not so much the back end processes themselves, but making sure the customer experience or the ratepayer experience is as good as it can be.
And maybe perhaps if you took their name and forwarded it to our GM, because it sounds like it's the exception, not the norm, and then they might be able to look into it on a case-by-case basis if that is actually happening.
Yeah, I have.
Well done.
Feel free to escalate or copy me in on those as well, because one of the strongest cultural aspects that I'm delivering as a leader is the opportunity to continue to learn. So these things you could look at them as failures, and they are. We haven't performed accurately. But the most important thing is not that we just fix the issue. We must do that. We must fix the issue. But we must also learn from those opportunities as well. So the more we are informed of them, the faster we can learn.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Boyne and then Deputy Mayor Immick.
Gary, thank you for your mahi. Just on page, we are on page 17?
We're still on 17, yep.
So I was just wanting to clarify too, it's just a general question, with the increase of deficit to 1.6 million, and it says there that you've got 1.3 million of that is regarding the invoices for Ministry of Transport. Is this the usual nature of following up invoices from Wakakotahi? I mean, to be able to have that amount out of the 1.6 million, 1.3 million in invoices still yet to be paid?
No, it's a good one to raise, and we've covered it. It's not Wakakotahi road subsidies.
Oh, yes.
This is the Ministry of Transport's share of the airport as a joint venture.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
As I think some of you will be aware, we've been caught in a somewhat complex process around our auditing of the airport accounts, which has delayed our ability to confirm how much we're settling with the Ministry of Transport. It's taken some time now that we've been clear of the long-term plan to focus on that, and I would expect that this will be resolved at least by the end of the year, if not earlier.
Thank you. So basically, they won't pay us their share until they receive audited accounts.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Deputy
I mean, I just wanted to, if
No, it's a good question.
1.6 million and 1.3 of it is because of that money.
I think that the difference this time is, what I can say is, having spent the time on it, I'm confident that I've now identified what the critical issue was, and therefore I have a pathway to resolve it.
To get the
audited accounts, to get the audited accounts done, so that we can then get the 1.3.
Thanks, man. So it was actually the same question, but you've already answered it. But so it's fully recoverable, is what we're saying.
It's definitely fully, there's some technicality in that process. I want to be careful about that one.
Thank you.
Okay, right, we're on to rates debtors, page 18.
Justin.
Luca.
Justin, who looked after our
Deputy Mayor Mick.
You can change my gender, thanks.
Because they both have the mayor part in that.
So on this one, can I come back and note, this was an action, it's been an action asked for previously, and I had suggested that the best way to do this is an annual review of rates rather than try to do it quarterly, because I don't think that's the most effective. This was an action coming out of the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting, where we confirmed that this paper will be brought to this committee. I anticipate doing this every year going forward, that we would do a year-end review for you, particularly of the rates.
Will that save us money if we're not having to do the quarterly?
It won't directly save us money, but it will ensure that the time of the staff is maximised as possible on collection. So it couldn't, incrementally. So we don't pay to get this delivered per se. It's simply the staff having to take the time to do the work.
Mayor Luca and Councillor Isles then?
Yeah, just the land rates. We always have 7 to 8 million, but are they always the same people? Or?
Oh, we haven't moved on to the appendix yet, Your
Oh,
Worship.
okay.
We'll come to that shortly.
Yeah, okay, all right.
We're still on page 18.
Well, that
was my
table,
question.
I presume, starts with 2024?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, that might be my error. The table at the bottom. Oh, yeah, might not have updated it. I'll have to look at that. It might be that the report that I was given from Justin, I failed to copy the right table across. If necessary, we will
I
circulate.
just wondered if your direction of
I believe that the first column saying 2023 should be headed 2024.
which means that we're sort of slipping behind slightly. With an error, I suppose.
Well, yeah, within a margin. It's what I would say is it has slipped behind, and we would prefer that it but given the economic constraints that occurred, it's probably not slipped as much as we had anticipated it might.
Yeah, so
And that's why I think this is our critical thing to monitor. Because they are, I believe they are the best indicator of the risk of us not collecting money in the long run, as opposed to actually the historic debt. I think some of the historic debt is structural rather than...
Yeah, well, that's sort of what I was getting
The
at.
focus tends to be on this year's invoicing and tracking not just the amount, but also the timing. Right? Do we get it as fast as we normally would? Because if the timing's slipping, it's an indicator that soon the volume will slip as well. One of our challenges for the 24-25 year will be the late invoicing in Q1. That is going to have knock-on effects. So it's now going to be hard for us to identify the difference between any delay in collection rates due to the rate volume, economic condition, or the late invoice. We're going to have to try to work through that process.
Councillor Isles?
Again, Madam Chair, I was going to ask, do we take this tabled report in conjunction with the agenda report?
I'm going to go to it's referred to as Appendix 1, so I'm going to take it as the appendix after we've finished the report, which there's only a couple more pages to go, then I will go to this.
Okay, so I'll hold my question until you get to that.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, page 18? I don't think we've got anything probably on 19. And then on page 20 it refers us to Appendix 1. So if everyone would like to go to the table document as Appendix 1, Do we have any questions on the first page?
What I was trying to ask was...
Yes, that's all right, you may ask it now, Mayor.
No, I was just wondering if these are the same old people, or where, you know, there's people are coming and going in terms of their what they owe. Like, is it structural and never going to change, or?
What you mean is the new debtors?
Yeah, are they new debtors that we're adding to the file, or?
A lot of them typically are the same.
Are the same ones, yes, okay. And so the numbers going up over time is probably with that sort of penalties?
The numbers going up is more the penalties part.
Associated with the penalties,
yeah. It's going up as well, it's not the volume of people.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
So we're talking about the land rates arrears to start with. Councillor Isles, was that your question on the land rates?
It is, but it's not on the front page. Does that matter?
No, we're doing the 2 pages which are land rates. Then we'll go to the water rates. So
I'm going to actually about page 5, which
that's right. Well, we're going through page by page. So we'll start off. Does anybody else have any? I will come back to you, Councillor Isles. Do we have any questions on the land rates? The first 2 pages, Councillor Boynton.
It's just a general question. I just have a question. How effective are the penalties and how successful is the process of recovering those fees or those charges?
So I think from the team's point of view, the most effective part of the penalties has been to use it as a tool to engage payment of the actual original invoice. We do have the ability to that penalty for due debts, as you mentioned. But it's more of a carrot to try and encourage people to contact us, come into a payment plan and give us the ability to try and give them some kind of remission to help them go into a payment plan with us.
It's just supplementary. So you would say that is there a good success rate?
It's reasonable. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, it's definitely. When I first joined the team about 2.5 years ago, I was very questioning of the P2, but now through the years I've seen that as a very effective tool, especially for long-term debts, to be able to enter into a negotiation and help someone to work on a payment plan with us. So I would say it is, yeah, that's changed my mind over the last year and a half.
So can I add some clarity, because Justin mentioned P2s, just to make sure if you're not aware. When we do our quarterly invoicing, if you don't pay on time that particular invoice, we add a penalty, which we call P1s. So the first haven't paid it on time, after a few days, a week I think it is, we add a penalty on that. That is designed to encourage people to address the immediacy of they haven't paid their immediate rates. What happens is, at the end of the year, whatever debt is left over from 2 years ago and beyond, we add a 10% penalty to that. It's a P2. It is a strategy that's particularly designed to try to leverage as much as we can out of those people who have not paid on a regular basis. So they're drifting. So rather than just let it go up and up, we try to use that as a tool. So it's kind of 2 strategies. One's an immediate short-term adjustment for people who are slipping behind. The other is as a strategy to engage people who are building up substantive debt on their property.
Thank you.
Right, the next page, we've just had the first page there of water rates arrears. Any questions? And then you've got the next page, which has got the total rates arrears, land and water. Any questions on those? Then I guess, is Councillor Isles, is yours on this page, the next page?
It's land rates arrears, which is what we're covering, but it's on, unfortunately the pages aren't numbered. Page number 5, I think.
Page 5.
Yeah. Can I speak to that one?
Yes, we're up to page 5 now.
Thank you. It's the bottom portion, the land rate arrears by location as at the 30th of June. The table seems a little bit unbalanced to me. You've got Whakatane coastlands, that's fully understandable. Taneatua, are we talking about Taneatua urban as opposed to rural? Then we go into Ruatoki and surrounds. What are the surrounds in Ruatoki? When you look then towards Murupara, Matata, Edgecombe, but somewhere in there must be the likes of Te Teko and what have you. How does Te Teko, again, I would have thought would have been one of those satellite towns like Taneatua.
Can I first say that this graphic is coming off data that we have available at the moment. One of the things we've identified is we believe the structure of that data to help us get insights needs to be improved. And Justin will confirm this table, it's part of our normal reporting suite, but we know that there's some challenges in actually truly getting insights from it. Predominantly because of the rural rate cards and how they distribute across the population basis. So the point we were trying to identify, I'm saying I don't think the way this is presented is going to help you see that and or understand it. I think if anything it's misleading rather than insightful. We, again, in the scope of work we're trying to do in the next 18 months, we are trying to improve this to give you the information that you're probably trying to get from this now. It's somewhat a...
Yeah, it's a question that had been asked, I remember, of Councillor Emick in previous trienniums, to actually pinpoint where the arrears were. This doesn't really give us that indication at all, does it?
No, we do a bit of work at year end for the auditors that we haven't yet completed, which is why I haven't tabled it, where we do a bit more of that. But what we're trying to do is change the way this report works so that we can get it out on a consistent basis.
Something to look forward to.
Hopefully.
I've got Councillor O'Brien, then I've got His Worship the Mayor, then Deputy Mayor Emick.
Thank you. Just to expand on that, Gary, I think it'll be better for us, for me to know, for our people, so I can have that conversation with them and see where are we with that.
So can I suggest that we take an action for the next committee, once we've done the work that I'm describing from the annual audit, that we bring not this whole report, but a piece that's focused on the distribution of debt across the communities back to you. Is that sounds like, well, that's what you're after?
Yeah, it'll help with one communication.
Is it a pay as an action rather than a written vote?
Yes.
Sorry, I had.
Is that on the same
Supplement.
question? You go then.
Supplementary to that, so with the ability to be able to focus in on those other townships, will that contribute to a strategy in which support can be given, a strategy to see how we can do better in the collection of those rates?
Absolutely. And I think that's why I call it insights. Insights don't actually create the performance, but it gives you some information that you can then make better decisions on. I think what you're putting to is, do we have opportunities to engage with particular parts of the community or areas of the community in slightly different ways that would be both beneficial for them in terms of their education of the process, but also beneficial for us in terms of collection. And we're always, Justin and I were talking about it the other day, we're always playing a fine line here between balancing off, systemic issues about ability to pay with the education side and making sure we're dealing with ratepayers as best we can. It's a tough one, right? I think you'll appreciate it. It's a really tough job that Justin and his team do in terms of engaging people who at times are under a lot of challenge. Well, we are still trying to maximise the collection rates and minimise the overall spread of rates across the community. It's possibly hard.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor Lucas.
Yeah, Justin and his crew did a great job. That graph that Councillor I was referring to, it would be useful if we had it divided by the number of properties that we're talking about. But anyway, it's an ongoing...
Not user-friendly, is it?
Yeah, I know.
Deputy Mayor Emick?
Same graph or same information, and it's great that we have this come back to us. As it reads now, I know it's going to read differently in the future, it looks like rural and Ruatoki and surrounds just don't pay anything. I'm aware that that's actually not the case. It's that there's a lot of Māori land there that is not utilised, that has to be rated according to the legislation, but there's something else in there that means that they don't need to pay it. Is that right?
There is remissions available for unused land. There's a few different categories, but yeah, we do offer a remission sitting on land that's essentially unused and won't be used. So yeah, you're right. Some of it can't be treated as non-rateable because it may have a future use. But at that point, we contact the owners and we ensure annually or triannually that there's still no intent of using it at that point in time and apply a remission as per the Act.
So when we get some graphs or diagrams in the future, can we have it like shaded or crisscrossed so that we actually see the true part rather than at the moment it just looks like no one's paying? Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions on the remaining bar charts in the reports? I'd be quite nice to move on, but yes,
it was just a generic one again. Is the water rates people not paying the same group of people who are not paying their land rates? Or is this more commercial?
That's a good question. We don't cross-reference, they both get treated separately. So the water rate debt won't sort of correlate with the land rate debt.
And totally what I would, so one thing to be careful of is in relation to the bar chart, which I know the page numbering not entitled water rates invoice and collected 2024. It would look like we're not collecting much water rates. This is distorted on the fact that the second water instalment for the majority of our water invoices goes out in June. But not yet collected. So we need to change the duct to improve that exercise as well. And then, again, anecdotally, what I would say is, if you look at the commitment and understanding of people to pay rates, the water rates payment is more directly to the fact that they use water. So therefore, you're likely to get payment more often than because it's like service equals outcome. Whereas the land rates, that connection's not necessarily.
right, I'll take one final question from Councillor Isles. Is that right? Can we take it offline with it? We've just got a big agenda we need to keep moving through, but is it, unless it's a pressing one?
That's all right.
Thanks, Councillor Isles, one last question on this report.
Thank you, Chair. Again, going back to the water rate arrears, and you look at Ruatoki and surrounds, and it's a massive, but I mean, most of those, or most rural communities aren't on metered water, they're on charge. So why would we have it out there?
Can we put a line through those graphs at the moment and let us come back to them? We should have done this before the meeting, so I apologise.
Okay.
Thank you. Right. We have a recommendation on page 11 that the Finance and Performance Committee receives a financial report for the period ending 30th June. Do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor Immick, seconder Councillor Boynton. Any discussion on that report? No debate? Sorry, Councillor Dennis.
In future, can we have someone translate this for us so that we can understand it? I appreciate where Gary's coming from. He's quite skilled in accountant speak, but it needs to be translated for some of the rest of us, please.
I haven't had a chance to talk to our GM yet, but I have actually asked our support officer to send me a Word copy of that report, and I'm going to play around with it to get it into something that is understandable for governance. I didn't actually have a chance to let you know that. I'm not going to change your content or your words, but I think there's a lot more readability for us for what we're looking for.
What I would note is that I absolutely agree. Capturing the content from a compliance perspective is really critical, and there is a lot of technicality in there. I can't avoid that, but I agree we can do a better job, possibly through executive summary as well.
Yeah, I was just going to change the formatting so it aligned better to what you're actually saying to the numbers. So, thank you, Councillor Dennis. Good point. Right, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Moved and carried. It's 10 to 10. In the next report, it's only page 21 to 36. It's not a large report, but just for timing, for the morning tea, are there a lot of questions in this report? So I wouldn't like to sort of start it and have to stop you after 40 minutes or something, so I was just sort of getting a bit of a heads up from councillors if they had a lot of questions.
Probably worth taking an early break because we probably will find a lot of questions as we go through it on a page by page basis again.
Okay, we'll take a quarter of an hour break. We'll come back at 10:10. Thank you, staff. Right, everybody, we're back live streaming, so we will move to our second report, which is our capital and operating budgets proposed to carry forward. I will do this report as the whole report, and then we can do the appendices. So, GM Gary, would you like to run us through a quick summary of the report?
So you'll appreciate each year we provided for budgets for capital and what we call operating projects, so not just BAU operating costs. It is always challenging, although we want to do better, at ensuring we understand the timing of when stuff will occur. We do need to make sure budgets are available, but there is normally a percentage of stuff that will slip for various reasons. Therefore, we need a process which you've agreed that it's 3 years so that we can manage within the 3-year cycle of the LTP, but we're not able to carry CapEx forward without the approval of council. So this paper is presented for endorsement and we take it. What I've done in this paper to try to help some understanding and clarity is 2 things. We've separated the concept of kind of like the major CapEx from the renewal, because I think understanding how they operate slightly differently is important. And then we've added some waterfall charts to help you understand kind of what happened. And this is, again, without trying to be complex, there is some complexity in the process. What the waterfall is doing is it's helping you understand how we move through the year. So if you look at chart 1, for example, how we move through the year from value for major project CapEx budgets that was set in the annual plan. We then carried forward from last year a certain amount of CapEx. Then when we reset the LTP, we took a dump of that CapEx out of this year and moved it to the LTP. That really then sets what our expectation was. So in chart 1, that's that 50.9 million. So if we'd delivered everything that we realistically expected in August, September last year that we were trying to deliver, we would have delivered 50.9. We actually delivered 34.6. Which means there's 16.3 that wasn't spent that we thought originally we would. 7.9 of that is released for various reasons. So there is some projects where we anticipated we would do them, but for certain reasons, they haven't proceeded. An example of that would be one of the cycleways that we were doing in one of the communities. There we ended up having discussions. We didn't want to go ahead with that project for various reasons. Therefore, we haven't spent that CapEx. That's the 7.9. That leaves us the 8.4 that we do think we still need to have the CapEx available to deliver those projects. And we've separated those between the one we're pretty certain of. There are certain projects that are less likely or certain because they're open to more of the timing, they're more complex engagement. What we're describing those as placeholders. We won't actually put those into the budget for next year, for the year in 25, but we're trying to let you know that there is a strong likelihood we will come back to you during the year and ask you to put it back into the budgets once we know when it's going to occur. That's really what I wanted to do.
Lovely. So we're going to, just to reiterate for Councillor Isles, we're just going to take questions for the report, the whole report, then we can take questions more specifically for the appendices. So, Councillor Boynton, anything on the report itself?
Just really in response to what you've explained, and sorry if I haven't quite got all of it, but I was just wanting to ask, with how you're saying about the carrying forward, and also those things that become placeholders, so basically put on pause, the budget for our long-term plan, it still includes that work being done. So if we put it on hold and then it comes back into the following budget, will that have an impact, or is it still calculated as part of that whole?
It's theoretically, so if you're looking at kind of how are we funding it, then theoretically it's already funded.
Okay.
But by putting it this way, it opens up some opportunities for us when we talked about, can we adjust the 26 rating?
Okay.
There might be some opportunities around those. Just to clarify, one of the particular reasons for this is those projects that we thought were going to be done in 24, we structurally don't have delegated authority to continue to deliver them. So this paper is about giving us the authority to keep doing those projects. Because essentially from the start of the LTP that you've agreed, the only thing we've got authority to do is everything in that LTP. Anything that we had authority to that we haven't yet done, we have to get authority again to carry it forward. That's what this process is doing.
Thank you.
So I've just got a general question myself. With particularly the CapEx, the carryovers, just in regards to workload, because obviously by moving what's in 24 to 25, you're adding a lot of projects to what's already been planned and budgeted for in 25. You're taking into account the workload and us being able to deliver them as part of these carryover approvals.
I am. What I would...
It's not just you, it's the other GMs.
Yeah, as an executive, I'll probably speak on our behalf. What I would say is, to a lesser degree, but similar to last year, remember, ultimately we were setting LTP to begin with in September, and we've kind of been working that process for quite a while. As we've done that, we now have more information, and we'll continue to get information over the coming months. I do believe once we carry this CapEx forward, likelihood that we will deliver the full value now of the adjusted is not 100%. I think there will be some that we will be able to identify as more likely than not, I'm not guaranteed it won't happen, but more likely than not to happen by 30th of June 2025. What we want to do is in the Q1 forecast, which we do based on September's performance, similar to what we did last year, ask our managers to now review those timelines and try to be much more accurate. Part of that continuous improvement.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on the report itself? No. Okay, so if we move to the appendices, which is on page 26, Appendix 1, the capital CapEx projects. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple. Hi again, Gary. Just in terms of Appendix 1 and the tables and the subsequent appendixes, I know that now rather than having everything, a CapEx project delivered within 1 year, it gets spread over 3 years. Is there any way you can colour code or do something to indicate to us that this is a longer term project? Or they're all long?
I agree with you. We need to work out how to disclose that, and I'm sure that one of my colleagues sitting in the back who Steve introduced will be working with us to work out how we do that better. How do we disclose a project we expect to deliver this year versus one that we'll spend money on and we'll make commitments to, but will we deliver on a longer term period? It is hard when you cut down just 1 year's financial performance. You lose the insight. So how do we do that without making it too?
They would be useful, I think, for any reader, so they don't judge what we're not delivering, because some of them are.
We are trying to do that, and I think we can do it better, but we're trying to do that in this year's annual report as well.
And just to add to that as well, Walt's on the line, but Walt's developing a business plan for this year.
Yes.
And within that plan, it's not only for this current year, it does indicate future years' commitments to the project, so it does give you that indication. So when that comes to council, you can get that.
Thank you. And my second question, thank you, is on Appendix 5, page 34, just in terms of the Whakatane Airport. So does the Ministry of Transport or Crown pay their 50% share of any expenses?
So expenses, yes. One of the things we're trying to work through this audit process is the documentation of the partnership arrangements around capital. So one of the things I want to clarify is you approve it from your perspective as a 50%. We've been told what are they approving, what are they committing to pay, and try to provide more clarity. Because I'm not sure that's as clear as it needs to be at the moment. It's the CapEx that worries me, not the OpEx.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we can claim our 50% share of operational expenses. The CapEx, our agreement with them is a bit vague.
It's not as, processes are not as clear as they have been in the past or need to be going forward. We are working on improving that right now.
Right, thank you.
So there's an appropriation process that the Ministry of Transport runs. So there's a lump of money that's shared amongst the 5 joint venture airports, and so there's about putting up your intentions and for then the conversation to happen around the commitment that the Ministry of Transport will give to your capital projects over others. So it's a bit of it's a pot in the mix. So.
Thank you.
Just supplementary to that, is it? Yes, Councillor Warrington. Is that right, Councillor Dennis?
Sorry, no, Councillor Dennis. Just supplementary to that. So given that situation around the pushing through with that, how can council itself, in terms of leadership, be able to make headway there? Is that just an administration or operations activity, or can the council or mayor or be part of moving that forward?
So I think there's a few ducks that are starting to line up a little bit around the airport, particularly. So Bevan is going to bring to you shortly a master plan for you to consider. So that's really is about what you would like to see in terms of your future intentions around the airport. That then will lead on to conversations with the ministry around support or otherwise for the components of that where that's necessary. And so that master plan itself becomes your leadership document, if you like. That's the plan you have to then be able to go and talk to the ministry. My understanding, and Bevan might be able to add to this, is the ministry are more open these days to the conversations around joint ventures and how they can support it. So we're in this situation, it's a government department, there aren't, the financial component isn't so much there, so it is perhaps playing a bit of a longer game around that. So I think that's the way the pieces start to come together in terms of our leadership, what we would like to see and how we try and make that happen. What's your question?
Yes, just one more part to that. Just how would that position in terms of timeline towards possibly being a project that regional development minister would look at in terms of regional projects?
I don't think that there are really any time constraints to that other than the period that the government is in, whether they change their policies in the next government. I mean, the Regional Infrastructure Fund really has only just, even though they say it's been open, it's only really just opened in the last month or two, where they've actually given criteria and a process for councils to follow. And his roadshow, which is on the 20th of September in this district, is part of that opening up the RIF funding process. I think the fact that we've got a couple of strategies that are almost completed gives us a really good platform to start talking to various government departments about how they can allocate their funding. And what we know about government departments is that unless you've got some sort of strategy that makes sense of a direction forward, it's very difficult for them to provide funding. So yeah, having the airport master plan finish its process here, the RIF applications or the RIF process opening up, our economic development strategy is hopefully coming through council in the next week or two. I think Apotiki is seeing it next week, so it's got its process. So it kind of feels like actually we've got a good platform for starting to think about actually what's the next step in terms of some of those broader applications. Just so you know as well, the city deals criteria or some guidelines came out probably only just this week, and city deals has been really tightened up. It's being allocated to 5 hand-picked regions, of which we're not one. And they're going to run a pilot process for about a year, so it'll probably be in the next election, next government cycle, that they'll open up the city deals. But so again, if we've got our ducks in alignment, then when those opportunities surface, we're ready to put forward our applications.
Thank you.
Councillor Dennis.
Madam Chair, just on that graph on page 26, please, just to make sure I'm reading this right, under stormwater drainage about halfway down, you talk about Whakatane Southwest, Western Catchment upgrade, etc. We're starting off this year, we budgeted 2 million, correct? And we have already spent 1.686 million, leaving 3.1. So when I come over here to the fourth column, from there to the difference, that's obviously carried over into the last column. So because that increases, that means that we have obviously budgeted 2 million for this current year, and we've budgeted 2.3 for next year plus. So that's how I can read that. So on the next line down, the Apanui Linear Park, because that fourth column is down to 300,000, and in the next column is 300,000, that means there's no budget for next year, that it's just a singular project where we just...
There's no budget in the LTP, so unless we carry that forward, the project won't be.
Yeah, that's right, so I understand that. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So I think you're saying that 552,000 basically is not going to be spent on that project. We only wanted to carry over 300,000.
Tidy it up.
Yeah, that was already been spent, the 1.0.
Spent 1.9.
Yep.
So they had the budget in 1.9, they've actually spent 1.1, so they've got 852 not spent, but they actually only want to carry over 300,000.
Instead of the 552.
Yeah, well, that's why they're just obviously not going to,
No longer think we're
they
based
need
on,
it.
unless Bevan's got additional content. Conceptually, Bevan might be able to clarify more. Conceptually, we're saying we don't need as much as we're written.
So you redirect that to us?
Either that or release it, and when we come back to you and say we've found a project that needs to happen that we didn't plan on, we may be able to say that these are some of the savings that enable us, or enable you to do those unbudgeted items.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions on any of the appendices? No, if not, we'll move back to page 21, which is where the recommendations are. It doesn't actually say on that recommendations that we receive the report, so I would actually like just to add on that recommendation that we receive the report, so including that recommendation. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Dennis, seconded Councillor James. Do we have any discussion or debate on the report? No, I'll pop the motion then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. We will now move to our organisation performance report on page 37. And we welcome to the table Lainey, Ayla, Molly.
Thank you. Yes, welcome Ayla Naidu, who's in our team. She's a strategic policy analyst, and she has prepared this report on behalf of our team. It is the Q4 organisational performance report for the financial year 23-24. So just a couple of points to note. During the last Finance and Performance Committee, the committee requested that we investigate how to track further back to show kind of more longitudinal trends. And that is something we are still intending to do. We have reworked some sections, you may have noticed, but we haven't yet totally revised the structure. And our intention is to keep thinking about that before the new financial year reporting begins at the end of Q1. So as usual, this report reflects some of the information you've actually already had in terms of the financial performance papers this morning, but it is separated into 4 sections. And in terms of high-level observations from our team, the first section is organisational health, and we are performing very well on most of those fronts regarding people, culture, and training, particularly in the health and safety and situational safety space, which, as we all know, is becoming more and more important. So it's great to see some of those trends. The second sector that we report on, service performance, we'll be presenting a paper later this morning on the resident satisfaction, and we have reported here that there has been an overall decrease in satisfaction, and we'll go into some detail later on in this meeting around those trends. But otherwise, in terms of our performance and service delivery, the back-end processes, so the processing of RFS, consents, communications and Lagoima are all tracking really, really well and in line with previous years. The third quarter or quadrant in the way we report in this paper is financial performance, and you've already heard some of those things. I guess the big highlight there is, as usual, we are behind in our capex expenditure and the associated revenue that comes from subsidies, and Gary can obviously explain anything else that you need to know there. And then the fourth one is preparedness. And you'll see from the report that there's been a great deal of activity from the Māori Partnerships team around maka, around te reo courses, and lots of really exciting activity in that space, which is really encouraging. The energy and emissions data is slightly worse than we would like to see, but there are some really good explanations, mainly around the aquatic centre and the need to use more gas than we anticipated. But as you'll hear in our 6 monthly report in November, there are some other really exciting developments in the energy space, particularly around electricity and solar. So nothing really remarkable there. And then the report finishes with the business plan, and Walt has prepared the data for that and is available to answer any questions. So handing over for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go through the report page by page, but is there any overall questions on the first part of the actual report paper before we move into the appendices? It's only 2 pages, I wouldn't expect there to be, but no, okay. So the first real page is actually on page 43. The rest is just the intro, so it's the organisational health measures. Does anybody have any questions on 43? 44. It does say there on 44 that additional information can be found in our health and safety report. That is the one that's going to be tabled. We have got page 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, we're on to preparedness performance measures, 51, must have been a great explanation, Lainey, 52, 53, tell me if I'm going too fast.
You're going too fast. Just for the unit on page 51, we're talking about energy management program. Who's the lead on that?
So it's an internal group that crosses all sectors of council. Georgina actually chairs the group, given that she manages the main facilities, but the administration of that group is currently run from my team in terms of climate responsiveness. So it's collaborative, really.
Thank you.
52.
Sorry.
No, that's fine, Councillor Bryan. Which page?
Just page 50 on engagement.
Yep.
Where are we with, we're missing a GM in that space? Yeah, we're missing a GM in that space, in the engagement space. Where are we in that space? In the LTP, I understand they were looking to recruit even more. Can you tell me where we are in that space? Because it sounds like the team is diminished.
Maybe we might direct that one to our new chief executive. It's not quite in the role yet, but it's I can say it's our new chief executive will step into his role, and I imagine it's one of the things he'll be looking at, what sort of structure he wants and everything. But
just currently, I think we have Michelle Hingston stepping up into the acting general manager role. So we filled the position for now, and somebody else within her team has stepped up to her role. Recruiting the additional role that was provided through the LTP. And to be fair to Steve, as a new CE, you'd expect to look at the structure at top level and make some calls. So,
Thank you. I just wanted to know whether we still had the capacity in that space to carry on with the work that's done.
it's good to hear that we do. So great.
Yeah, I think we're keeping on top of it.
Can I make a comment just anecdotally on that? Because what I've seen is in the leadership that we've seen over the last year, the really positive aspect is they have been helping us as our teams improve our capability in that space. So I can speak to the fact that for our freedom camping bylaw that we are currently reviewing, our team have actually designed the iwi liaison process with their support and actually are able to take a lot of that load on within the teams themselves, which is exactly the direction I think we want.
We've seen some great improvements. Councillor Boynton?
So is there an indication that there wouldn't be a GM for this area?
First of all, just a point of clarification, Paul wasn't a GM. He was a director, which is, he was a third tier manager but reporting to the chief executive. So it was a little bit of an unusual structure. But I believe that was in place, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was in place in order to get us to where we are today. So that was about providing that strong leadership around the ELT, pushing that down through the organisation, getting the strategy in the right place, and then getting us prepared for the LTP around capacity and capability requirements over the next 10 years. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that point.
Well, I mean, because that wasn't the impression that we've had over the recent year in terms of meetings and that he would be referred to as in our meetings as that. So the Māori Strategic Development area never had a GM and is not part of that executive team?
Well, a general manager, perhaps it's a conversation for a different time, but a general manager is, what you'll find is you have a portfolio of a general portfolio of activities. Whereas in Paul's role, he was overseeing the Māori relationships strategy. So there's a difference between a GM and his role as a director of that portfolio. That's all. Yeah. It was just a point of clarification.
Right, thank you. We'll move on. We were on page 53. 4, 5, 56. Anything on 57? Deputy Mayor Imick.
Yeah, thank you. Morning, Lainey and Ayla. It says on page 53 that we're like 83% to near completion or completed, and yet when we look at this table here on page 57, and this is the summary up until the end of June, I'm surprised there's so many not green on this.
I think we have to remember, because we've had the same question raised at previous meetings, that it's there's 204 items in the business plan. These are just bringing to us the ones that are high risk or medium risk. So it looks out of perspective when you see it. Yeah, but they're not bringing it to us everything that's green.
There are also a couple that are repeated in this table because they are allocated different ways. So yeah, it looks worse than I think it really is.
On the previous page, there was all the items completed, which is what was to look through. Yeah, we could put greens through all of those, but yeah.
Well, maybe just make that page green.
So is there anything else on page 57 or 58 with those risks there? 59, 60, 61. I don't think we need anything on 62 or 63, which are blank pages. So we will go back to our recommendation on page 37, which is basically that the audit performance report for quarter 4 be received by the committee. Do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor Imick, any discussion or debate? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our draft annual report, which is on page 64. And I think that's our GM again. We've got Lainey still and Gary there in support.
This is another collaboration between the strategy and the finance team. And I'd like to welcome Sarah Ellis, who is one of our senior strategic policy analysts in the strategy team. And I just want to actually just acknowledge the amazing work that she is doing. So you might remember in the Risk and Assurance Committee, we talked about a slightly different approach, and the chair of that committee was a little surprised to be hearing from the strategy team in that committee. And the reason for that is that we are trying to work together in a tighter way towards effective project management. And so Sarah's really stepped up in that area and is really leading the team through this, which is awesome to see. It's a fairly straightforward report in the sense that essentially, as you will know, there has been a delay caused by the deferral of the adoption of the LTP. You know that there are knock-on implications, and you know that the audit for the annual report 23-24 is going to take place later than originally intended. So because of that, while usually you would see something that is closer to the finished product for the draft annual report at this meeting, we're not quite there yet, so this is very drafty, and it should be so, because actually the focus has been on the LTP, and the next month we'll be preparing this for the auditors, as you all know. So this report actually seeks some initial feedback on the content, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment, but really importantly actually seeks delegation for the chair and deputy chair of this committee to sign off on the draft report for the auditors before the next Finance and Performance Committee, because the dates don't quite match up, so we would like your support to do that in the interim. The actual note that I have for the content of the report is that the financial impact statements that are the second appendix will be within the bulk of the report itself. So it reads a bit funny at the moment, but they will be interspersed within the actual bulk of that. And the reason that they're separated out in your agenda today is that they just weren't quite ready at the same time. So that is why it might feel a bit strange when you're reading through, but essentially that will all be in the main document. And then you also have a tabled appendix from Gary's team today, which is the notes to the financials and the draft financial statements that will go at the end of the annual report.
Just ask a GM, if you'd just like to give us just a very quick summary with how accurate in it you think the figures are, just to let us know, because we know that there's still a lot of work that will need to go into the numbers. So
the funding impact statements are reasonably good. The financial statements, the way I would describe that is 98% of the volume is done, but the final 2% drives about 20% of the movement in the numbers.
Yeah.
So the numbers on the whole are going to change quite a bit in the coming month, but the volume that we've actually completed to get to where we are is a lot. It's just those final bits are the big figures, like valuation changes, etc.
So we're probably not really looking to get much feedback on the numbers, because they're not going to be what they are. So just to let the committee know that it's not about that.
There's a piece in the financials, probably when we get to that, if you want to look at it, I would like to just discuss one of the structural change that we've made so that you're familiar with that.
Before we do, probably from our perspective, it's getting a sense that the nature of the narrative and the content is feeling right or close to being right in terms of the projects that we've picked out, in terms of telling the story of what was done in that financial year. And also, obviously, the performance measures are in there too. And so just really for today, getting a sense, are we on the right track with the nature of the content?
Lovely, thank you. So does anybody have any questions on just the couple of pages there in the actual report itself before we move on? Yes, Deputy Mayor Amick.
It's more a statement than a question, is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Morning, hi Sarah. It's not really so much about the content except perhaps the context. One of the things when you read through is a lot of the stuff, even though it's an annual report, it reads like there's like new things in there, rather whether there's some reference to it being part of the 2021 to 2024 first stage of that long-term plan for the 21 to 31. I'm just thinking like when the community reads stuff, sometimes it looks like it's a brand new thing, we've just plopped it in there because we wanted to do it, rather than referencing that there was something that was already pre-agreed and decided on.
That's great feedback, thank you. We'll make sure that we put a few more framing statements in there to make sure that this was always part of the plan. And that
yes. Yeah.
Gary, If you'd like to just refer us to the page you're talking about, that you want to do that structure.
So mine is in the tabled appendices.
Yeah. Which page are you referring to, Gary?
I'll just get that open. And so there's two pieces to this. The first one I'd probably point to in particular is the one that's titled Statement of Comprehensive Income and Expenditure.
Yep. You got your page number that one's in?
It's on page 12.
On our agenda. Okay.
Of the attachment.
Attachment, yeah.
That came out. That's been tabled. There's only a couple of copies of those, but they are in Stella.
In Stella.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, I knew I've seen it. Yep, okay.
So, one of the things, and one of the reasons, multiple, not just the LTP, but you'll appreciate, I think, those members, particularly on risk and assurance, that there are a number of actions identified that we needed to make improvements on. This is an example that I want to demonstrate. So, if you have a look at the top of that table, you can see that we now separate operating income from asset development and revenue. From a standards perspective, we have to show it as revenue. One of the challenges we've always had is we also have to produce a funding impact statement. And therefore, for the users of the report to understand how the funding impact statement relates to this performance measure and how this performance measure is covered in the notes, I think has always been overly complicated. So what we've done is we've broken this report down so that the funding impact statement can be directly tied, not through working papers in the background, but on the face of the statements can be directly tied. And also that each of the items in the statement of income expenditure and the financial position, each of those can be directly tied back to a specific table in the notes. Whereas quite often in our previous version, the way we did it, none of the content was missing. But you had to know how to put the tables together to understand how they related. So we've simplified a lot of that, but to do that we've had to essentially completely rewrite the structure of our notes and our financials. So for those of you who see it being different when you get the final version, that is why. So we're trying to do that, help the users of the financials. And that will also simplify our audit processes. Because instead of the reconciliations living in the background, the reconciliations are already demonstrated through the financial statements.
Makes sense.
Yeah. No, that sounds great, Gary.
And hopefully it'll save auditors' time and team time.
Substantively.
Okay, so given we're just supposed to provide feedback on the content and the presentation and the overview and everything, I won't go through it all page by page. It's not a document we're adopting or anything, so I'll just take questions over the report and the appendices, one by councillor. So does anybody have any specific questions or feedback? Any feedback can also be given to them, when I say them, to staff offline as well, at any stage. So
I can give one person. It's just, I'm really pleased to see that we're going to be aligning with the way Audit New Zealand would like our reporting to be. It's just hard to give a comparison if you don't have a copy of a previous annual report in terms of structure and format. But looking forward to being able to hold both of them when we do our delegated authority of approving the draft report.
So if there's no other questions, I can put the recommendations forward. I'm going to add a recommendation that it be received, the report be received on this recommendation as well. So could I have a mover and a seconder for that? It'll be the 3 recommendations, moved by Councillor Boynton, seconded Deputy Mayor Immick. Any debate or discussion? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much. And like I said, please provide feedback to staff at any time if there's anything else. Okay, so we will move on to our second to last report, which is the residents' survey, which is on page 172.
Thank you, Sarah. So Holly will be introducing Virgil Troy, but he isn't here yet. Is that right?
Just emailed him to online.
Okay. So I wonder whether you might be able to switch them around.
Are we running early?
I think we might be.
Be a little bit longer. Is that okay if we did the health and safety first? That's not gonna. Okay, well, just for those on live stream, we have got our health and safety report. It is a tabled item. Are they? There are copies for members of the public there of our health and safety report as well. Got them, lovely. Is Emlyn ready and available? We'll move to, it's for councillors, it's a separate item in Stella.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just it's a 4-page report. So, hi Michelle, welcome. So I've got Emlyn and Michelle there to give us a run through on the health, safety and wellbeing report.
Thanks, councillors. Thanks, Chair Julie. I suppose the first thing to note around the report is based on the briefing that we had yesterday. This does feel like almost a report in transition now, and you'll see over the next coming meetings a significant shift and change in how we report health and safety in terms of forward-looking metrics and retrospective metrics. But Michelle's on site; she can take us through the report. I won't take for the first time in a long time. I'll say I won't take the report as read, so I'm happy to move through the report with councillors.
Lovely, thanks you, Emlyn.
Yeah, good morning all, and thanks again for allowing us to table this report today. So of course we met yesterday in the briefing and talked through our health and safety reset quite extensively. Can you hear me?
Just a little bit more.
Cool. So we spoke about the audit report, and you spent some significant time with Melissa Vining from Findex. So hopefully that gave you a good understanding of where we are at. The formal project team has been put together, and as Emlyn has noted, one of the actions that will come out of that series of corrective actions through the project will be to significantly revise this reporting that is coming through to you. Moving through to events, you'll see the numbers there and some details about some of the incidents that we have had. In the period that we're looking at, we've had a couple of reasonably significant investigations. So the first being the suspicious package that was found at the Civic Centre. So you'll note information about how that investigation progressed. And also there was another incident at the Whakatane Wharf, so the hard stand with a member of the public, one of our contractors and some staff members. So you'll note there that police have issued a formal warning to the member of the public in relation to this incident, and it is now closed from our perspective. Moving through, the other thing you will note is that within our vault risk reviews, there are still a significant number of reviews that are overdue. I have noted in the report there that one of the other actions that is coming out of our audit is further understanding and clarification of roles and responsibilities, particularly of our managers, and understanding of their part in those risk reviews, and further development of their capability around being able to carry out those risk reviews. So that will be, there will be a large education piece of our upcoming project. The last section of the report, 8.5, talks to some changes that have happened from a IOD, Institute of Directors level. So there's been a new document released. It hasn't replaced the old document, but is sitting alongside it in terms of health and safety, good governance, and we've just provided some information there. If anyone would like to see further detail or would like to be sent a copy of that, please let me know. I can arrange that. That's all I have to present, but happy to take any questions.
Right, thank you. So we've got 4 pages there. Do we have any questions on any part of that report?
Thank you. Good morning, Michelle. It's actually administrative, I think. So you've got the date as Thursday the 19th. Was this a report that was going to be done on the 19th? And you waited till after the workshop to bring it to this one, or they're independent?
No, it wasn't deliberately to wait until after the workshop. There was an error on my part from in terms of getting onto the agenda on time, so that's why it's had to be tabled. So the report had been prepared with the intent that it was on the agenda for today's meeting, but apologies, I didn't make it in time for the agenda to go out. So that's
Okay, I was just trying to.
It does reference that you will get the health and safety audit report, which of course you received yesterday, so there's a bit of a timing issue there.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Happy to move.
Okay, right, we'll move to the recommendation that the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Report April to June be received, and we've had it moved by Councillor Oss, seconded by Councillor James. Any discussion or debate? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Carried, thank you very much. We'll go back to our main agenda and back to page 172. And yes, looks like we've got Virgil's online. Welcome, Virgil. I will leave in Holly's hands, or Lainey.
Can I just say something before Holly introduces Virgil?
Yes.
Which is to say that, as you know, Holly has been working in this space for a number of years now, and I just want to recognise that she has been promoted to a senior strategy policy analyst commencing on Monday. So congratulations.
Oh, well done, Holly. That's awesome. Well deserved. So, congratulations.
Morning Council. Today we're presenting the 2023-24 Resident Satisfaction Survey. We do welcome Dr. Virgil Troy, who is joining us online today. He will talk through the results and answer any questions that you may have. So I'll hand over to Virgil. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today. What I'm going to do is just give you a summary of the main findings, and then I'll endeavour to answer in as much detail as I can any questions. Any that I can't, of course, I will respond through Holly in more detail if it requires it. So what I'd like to do is just share the presentation which was in your notes. So what I'm referring to is page 175, so just assuming, is that popped up there?
Yes, it's in our agenda, yes.
Okay, and is it on screen? It's on screen there, I can see that.
That's
good.
Virgil.
Okay. All right, so I'll get underway. So first of all, I'll just sort of outline the purpose. As part of its ongoing consultation process, the Whakatane District Council commissions a resident satisfaction survey every year. And the purpose of the research is to consultatively engage with Whakatane's district's residents to determine levels of satisfactions and perceptions of council services, communication and management, and of course to identify opportunities for improvement. Brief summary of the methodology. Every quarter we collect data through a variety of methods. We collect telephone surveys, social media, marketed online surveys, and we also undertake postal surveys as well. And a total of 150 surveys per quarter contribute to an annual sample of 600 in 2024. We then proportionally conduct these surveys across the Whakatane District community boards with responses weighted to match the 2018 census gender, age and ethnicity proportions. We also undertake a national survey of councils which provides benchmarks, and that allows the Whakatane District Council to compare their results to a national average, and the results in the report are presented with a 95% confidence margin, plus or minus 4 to 5%. So whenever you're looking at a report like this, it's really important to consider the environmental context that the research was undertaken in. So when we look at that, we need to identify and acknowledge that national and regional conditions need to be considered when we're evaluating it. There's a cost of living crisis which is continuing to rise in New Zealand, which causes considerable financial pressure for Whakatane District residents. And what we've identified is that residents are increasingly aware of the impact of their personal finances and of the wider district economy. Now, the long-term plan consultation process highlighted council spending and financial management, especially regarding proposed rates increases, and council spending priorities are particularly important given the impact of household budgets. So when we're surveying people, residents are likely to view council-led developments and service delivery with a focus on efficiency and cost saving. The Whakatane District Council faced a challenging environment that may have influenced community perceptions of its performance. So with that in mind, I'll go straight to page 183, which I'll quickly bring up on screen. And what we're looking at here is overall satisfaction. So in 2024, 53% of residents were satisfied with the Whakatane District Council services, which is slightly down from 61% in 2023, but it is comparable to the national and also district council benchmarks of 54% and 56% respectively.
Virgil, can I just say, are you happy to take questions as you refer to these pages?
I can do if you like. If there are questions, I'll do my best.
Yep, so I think it's probably easier then we go back to the pages again. So if councillors would like to just raise a hand as we go to the pages. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Emick has a question for you.
Yeah, just back on 183, Virgil, and hello. So I respect that our satisfaction is down a little, but we're very close to the New Zealand average, but other district councils, you know, a little bit lower. With other councils looking at our overall results, not just this one, are they all decreased that 4 or 5% or something from the previous year?
So this benchmark that we've undertaken, typically it's of 400 responses across New Zealand, and it excludes the major metropolitan areas. So what we have noticed in different places is that there are some increases, and in some places there are declines. So it tends to be a little bit up and down, but what we have noticed is that there has been a minor lowering of overall satisfaction, particularly around this period where budgets are being looked at, and of course change of government, and then we've of course got the financial crisis. So those things are wearing on people's minds, and they have had some impact on different councils, but some councils have shown minor increases.
And just a supplementary to that, if we take that as a trend over the last 10 years, do you know what that looks like? Because we normally just compare ourselves to the year before, don't we?
We do have, I'd have to have a look at what page that is on. I know that we do provide like an ongoing trend, but I haven't actually got it right here in front of me. But I can actually answer that. We do actually have that information. We do break it down on a service by service basis, so you can see whether or not there is like a consistent linear trend where things are going up or down or remaining consistent. But I'd have to go and have a look to see if we've actually done that or present that in the report across all of councils and all overall satisfaction over that period.
Thank you.
Good question, and I'll follow up on that with Holly.
Councillor Boynton.
And just following on from Deputy Mayor Emick's question, do you also think that there has been a trend in disinformation via social media that has also impacted on perceptions of councils or local authorities?
So I'd only be able to respond to that anecdotally. I think that from what you see in the media, there's definitely media in general, be it social media or mainstream media, there has been a lowering in trust of media outlets, and there is a degree of skepticism about what actually is true and what isn't true, and what is information, what is disinformation. So all of that needs to be taken into the mix in terms of looking at how people are directly responding to the various questions that we asked in the research. But we do collect it across multiple methods, so it's not that they're purely online and therefore they're going to be skewed towards more of a disenfranchised online population. We do collect across those different methodologies, so it does tend to balance itself out. But it is definitely, it would be, I believe, an influencer.
Thank you. Thanks, Virgil. We'll leave you to keep working your way through. We're on 183.
No worries. Okay, so I'll now go to the next page in your notes, which is 184. So what we see here is that 18 of the 29 services that were rated by residents achieved a satisfaction rating of over 60% or higher, and we have 5 services that exceeded 80% satisfaction. These top services were curbside waste collection, the crematorium, the Whakatane Exhibition Centre, libraries and parks and reserves. The lowest services were dog control at 40% and roads overall at 48%. There were some significant drops in satisfaction in terms of people's perceptions about public halls, cemeteries and drinking water. And there was an increased satisfaction seen in noise control, up 13 points, road safety, up 3 points, and dog control, even though it was one of the lower rated deliverables, it was still up 2 points on the previous year. So I'm going to fast forward to page 223 and talk a bit about spending, because that tended to be quite a significant point that came out in the research this year. So in 2024, the top priority areas for investment were roads at 48%, which is slightly down on the previous year at 59%, and in 2022, and public toilets 39%, water supply 38%, business promotion 36%, and footpaths at 35%. Roads, bridges, and infrastructure were frequently mentioned in unprompted comments as areas that needed further development. On the next page, or page 225, what this does is it shows two charts, one with saying spend more and the other one which highlights areas that people believe should be spent less on. So there was a general decline in residents wanting more funds spent across most service areas, reflecting concerns about rates increases and council spending. Roads, while still a top priority, saw a drop at 11% in preference for increased spending. Support for more funding in stormwater, parks and reserves and climate change also decreased by 5% or more. However, there was increased support for spending in dog control at 34%, curbside waste collection at 14%, water supply at 38%, and sports fields at 16%. Almost half of residents, 45%, suggested reducing council spending, focusing on costs related to the council building, roading, car parks and unnecessary services and maintenance. Spending priorities varied by age, with roads being a consistent priority across all demographics. Galatea and Murupara residents particularly wanted more funding in the area of parking and climate change action at 48%, and dog control at 43%. Public toilets were a major concern in Taniatua and Waimana at 59%, while street lighting was more important in the Rangataiki area at 25%, and Taniatua and Waimana at 23%. Younger residents prioritised car parking, 42%, and public toilets at 41%, and cycling and walking facilities at 35%, with older residents more focused, understandably, on footpaths at 49% and road funding. So I'm now going to move forward to page 228.
Sorry, Virgil, did anyone have any questions on that? No, sorry to interrupt. You go. What page?
We're on now 228. That should be on your screen. So moving now on to life in the district, contact with council and communication, community engagement. In 2024, 64% of residents felt that the Whakatane district was a safe place to live, slightly down from 69% of the previous year, but it's above the overall national average at 60%. 60% rated their quality of life as good to very good, which continues a slight downward trend. And recommendations to live in the Whakatane district dropped slightly with an NPS of -16%, though it remained a preferred holiday destination with a positive net promoter score of 4%. On the next page, 229, in your notes, what we see here is that 36% of residents contacted the council's customer service department, which is up from 30%, with 73% satisfaction, and council contact with community board members stayed at 10%, but also had a positive satisfaction rating of 73%. On the next page, community engagement and communication. It rose to 54%, up from 43%, with increased participation in surveys at 52% and formal submissions at 29%, which was up from 21% in the previous year. On page 231, social media was the preferred communication method for 60% of residents, including 71% of the 18 to 39-year-olds and 30% of those aged 65 year and over, which is up from 14%. And traditional media remained important for older residents. So the key message there is to maintain a mixed methods approach in your general communications, but ensure that you have a good presence on social media. On the next page, Council Communication and Leadership. In 2024, 42% of residents were satisfied with the Council's communication and consultation, which is consistent with 2023 levels. Satisfaction with the Council's responsiveness to the public needs dropped to 27%. It's down from 35% in 2020 in the previous period, making it the least satisfactory communication attribute. Keeping people informed was the highest rated communication attribute with 52% satisfaction. And on page 234, Council Leadership. Overall satisfaction with Council leadership decreased to 36%, down from 44% in 2023, with specific declines in Council leadership at 34% and strategies for prosperity and wellbeing at 30%. And on to page 237, where we're looking at management, day-to-day management. Satisfaction with Council's day-to-day management also declined to 33%, down from 46% in 2023, particularly in financial management areas where trust and value for money at 22%, good spending decisions 20%, and managing finance as well at 19% all saw significant drops. Now, with those declines that I've highlighted, once again, I just go back to my original message that in terms of looking at these overall results, the 2024 results should be viewed within the challenging economic environment which affects both councils and residents. Residents are under financial pressure from rising living costs and are assessing council performance and decisions with this in mind. The long-term plan process in 2024 significantly influenced residents' perceptions, particularly due to increased rates to cover council financial requirements. Evidence shows residents are more engaged in council processes with increased formal submissions reflecting the importance of these issues. The high proportion of residents expressed disapproval of rates increases and council spending in 2024, which is at 41%. That's over double to what it was in 2023. This was particularly concerning investments in roading, boat harbour and other developments. There are calls for increased spending in service areas to decrease, while spontaneous comments for less spending have also risen. These challenges are not unique to the Whakatane District Council, as we're seeing similar effects observed nationwide with decreases in national benchmark figures. Despite declines in its own results, the Whakatane District continues to perform well against broader benchmarks, maintaining comparable levels to similar councils. And focusing on core needs, spending priorities, community engagement and transparent communication, all these things will help Council navigate and improve during these challenging times. Any questions?
Lovely, thank you. We'll take any questions over anything of the report or anything with the survey results. So does any councillors have any questions? But Virgil, that was a lovely summary, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think everyone's just trying to get their head around some questions. Councillor.
It's a lot of information. It's a very detailed report. It's a really comprehensive piece of research. So yeah, absorbing all of that can take a bit of time. But if there are any additional questions, if you direct those through Holly, we're more than happy to provide more information in any area that you require.
Yeah. Councillor Isles and then Councillor James.
Two questions. Firstly, when's the next survey due, Virgil?
We undertake the research on a quarterly basis, so that next cycle is coming up in the next few weeks.
Okay, so that will reflect the recent rate rise, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Why also too, there seems to be some real discrepancies, when I look at Taniata Waimana, for example, over some of the leadership, which is low, and then when you look at the management on page 237, it's up to 39%. So what sort of reflection or impact can it have? And I mean, when you look at the public toilet aspect, for example, there's a public toilet in Taniata and there's one within the reserve in Waimana, and again, looking at the sewage, there's no actual reticulated sewage in Waimana, so why would that Taniata/Waimana. Some of the numbers seem to be a bit skewed.
So in some instances with various services, we ask if people have actually used them, so we're able to report on that measure. And with each area has its own unique characteristics. So sometimes the results in one particular area can be very different from what they are in other areas. I'm not sure if I'm answering specifically that question or if I've given you enough detail.
Just on from that, roading is always rated highly, and again, it's a misconception quite common with our residents that the state highway network, which has been under a hell of a state of repair for some time, is deemed to be a local road. So again, if it comes to customer satisfaction, exiting Waimana in towards the CBD of Whakatane, for example, that would be something that sticks in your mind, day in and day out. So again, it does have a negative impact, I guess, on those communities.
In terms of that, we do highlight the difference between those that are managed by, as you say, state highways versus local roads. And even when we do that, sometimes people don't necessarily acknowledge that because they just see one road going into another road, and where does that stop and where does that start? So yes, we do highlight specifically that we're referring to those roads that are managed and maintained by councils, but sometimes there is a disconnect between where that starts and where that ends. So you tend to sometimes get feedback in relation to roads in general rather than just specific roads, even though we do question it that we do structure the question that way to differentiate between those two.
Yeah, exactly. And you can throw into that mix the Pekatahi Bridge, which people always think too is a local, which is not. It's managed by Wakatahi. Thank you.
Good point, Councillor Miles. I've got Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Virgil. It's pretty comprehensive. A lot of data in there, so thanks very much. But just for you to summarise across the board, are we better, are our adjustments from year to year better or less than the national trend?
I think that on average it seems to be on a par, if not higher, in some areas. So it's a difficult one. When I say it's a difficult one, if you just look at maybe some decreases, it's very easy to turn around and perhaps say, what are we doing? What could we do more of? Or have we not done things correctly? But I think that, from the feedback that we've got, that, there is lots of positive work being done. Had you not done that, then obviously it might have been expressed differently. And the fact that people have been significantly impacted by the current economic environment, that generally tends to bring everything down, even though you're providing excellent services in areas, or you're providing new service or increased funding, etc. It sometimes gets lost when people's financial situations and the economic environment is on a downward trajectory, which it has been. There are indications that it's beginning to improve, and we may very well see that all of the efforts that you put in place are acknowledged and maybe be recognised more positively over the coming quarters. But it's really important to look at all of the efforts that you've put into your various initiatives as being positive contributions to improving satisfaction, and that they may not necessarily have been given the level of credit they would have been had the economic and financial situation that everyone is experiencing been not as severe as it has been.
Councillor Boynton.
Just a general question. In any of the satisfaction surveys, have the governance themselves been part of the surveys?
No, it's purely of whenever we undertake this for a local government organisation, it's sorry, can you just rephrase your question? Just make sure I've got you on the right.
I was just wondering whether or not governance themselves are surveyed, or if councillors themselves and leadership is surveyed in terms of understanding our perceptions around what we see in our satisfaction of our own services. I'm not saying that we
we then skew this information, but I just wanted to know in general, has that been done or is it ever done?
Just recalling in the sands of time, in the back of my memory, there was an LGNZ piece of research done a few years ago, which had like a net promoter score rating. I'll have to go back and actually have a look at that. But in terms of national governments doing this kind, or sort of country governments doing this kind of research, I'm not aware of that. It might be piecemeal or ad hoc or bespoke sort of research that's done over time, but in terms of like this sort of thing, I think that elections tend to be the greatest indicator of whether or not people are satisfied or dissatisfied. But yeah, this is typically seems to be something that is done by local governments, district councils, regional governments, etc., but not necessarily on national governments.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any more questions of Virgil, Holly or Lainey? Yes, you may, our acting chief executive.
That's right. I just wanted to, here's the report, here's the statistics, and that's fine. So there's a sort of the so what question. So what do we do with it now? And I guess I just want to give you a bit of assurance that we will take this as an exec, and each of us will reflect on our own areas. You reflect on things like, some indicators here around how we communicate best with our residents and the like. And so there are lessons to take out of it, and I think it's important not to just look for excuses why. There are circumstances that exist, of course, that will drive some of these numbers, but there's also some great lessons here. And I think, if I'm right, there may be some verbatim comments as well that go with it. Are there?
It's from respondents themselves, yes, there are.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the real goal is actually in those comments, and not necessarily just the statistics and the results. So just to let you know that it's not just going to sit on the shelf.
It would actually be, just following on from that, quite helpful just to even get a couple of page update report through to this committee on the improvements that the executive leadership team are going to make based on the survey results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and some of it does get picked up also in the business plan, because the the reports then lead to actions. We pick them up, but actually, something that's perhaps a little bit more tailored might be useful in future reports.
Deputy Mayor.
Just one other sort of comment. Thanks, Virgil, for those couple of trend lines. There's 3 or 4 of them. That's quite interesting to see that perhaps in the former years when we perhaps had less communication and in particular social media, that the scores were higher. And as we've increased the level of communication and social media, that the perceptions of council performance and leadership seems to have declined.
There's a couple of things there. Is that I know that it's only a couple of years ago, but we had this thing called COVID, where we were all locked down and shut in our houses, etc. And when you look at the sort of, I guess, the last few years, even though we don't necessarily think about it now, we'll try not to anyway, that definitely had a significant impact on everyone in New Zealand and everyone in every local government area. So when you're looking back at how those trends are sort of occurring, we pretty much went into lockdown around 2019. We had about 3 years or 2.5 years of being shut down from the rest of the world. And we came out of it and bang, change of government, and then we've got the cost of living crisis, which kicked in around that same time. So it's been a couple of low blows and a couple of unexpected sort of whacks around the head in terms of the community and residents. So it's important to consider that prior to 2019, that all of that basically occurred afterwards.
Thanks. Right, thank you. Well, if there isn't any other questions or comments, I'll take the opportunity to say thank you very much, Virgil. It was, as usual, a very comprehensive report and a very good summary from you for us. And I'm going to go back to the recommendations on page 172, and I'm going to just add in another recommendation. So the first one will be that the annual residents survey results be received, and then the second recommendation would be that an update report following results from the annual residence survey be brought back to the Finance and All Performance Committee.
You're going to move that?
I'm happy to move it.
I'll second it.
You can second that, sorry Lainey?
Can that be incorporated into the report at the end of Q1? That actions that exec have agreed to take in response to this one?
Yeah.
Makes sense, yeah.
We're almost at the end of the year.
I mean, we don't know the timing of it, I mean, you know, when they're going to get to do it and everything, so, I mean, I'm happy just to leave it with the executive feel it's the best place to report and leave that with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a new thing. So yeah, let's have a think. But I think it would be really useful doing something like that.
Yeah. Happy to leave it with staff to determine how best to report it back to us. So it's had a mover, a seconder. Any debate or discussion on those reports? No, I'll put the motion, those two motions I've just read out, two recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried, thank you very much. So that's the end of our meeting. We will end it with our karakia from Councillor O'Brien.
Kia ora tātou, maki whakakapi, ki te raki inui tātou, kia tau kia tātou katoa, kia tofu o tātou rariki e hukurati. Te anga o te atua, te whiwhinga tahitangi, te wairua taku wāke, āpera.
Thank you to staff and thank you to the members of public for attending.